Hey, welcome back to Beyond the Fourth Veil. As always, I am a co-host, Robert Johnson, and I've also got the green shirt to my red shirt.
Darin Lanners. It's my Keep Vermont Weird shirt.
Oh, that's pretty good. I like that. Yeah. The only, every time I think about Vermont, I think about that. Oh my gosh. He says the great state of Vermont will not apologize for its cheese. It's some
Oh,
movie, and I can't remember who said it. But anyway,
anyway,
so the big news, we
yeah.
had a UFO hearing today, and it was kind of cool. I don't know that it went beyond some of what we already knew, other than now it's been said in front of Congress. Thoughts, Darren?
Yeah. Um, there's a lot of repeat of stories that or encounters that have already been out there. For example, one of the witnesses was David Fravor, who was the commander of not only had the Tic Tac encounter, but he was commander of that flight group on the Nimitz carrier. So he was the top dog on fighter pilot on that carrier, and so very much a very credible witness. Ryan Graves again. Ex Navy pilot was reporting seeing things off the East Coast, especially in flight test area off the coast of Virginia, described, and again today described these objects that were spheres in a cube, so essentially black spheres in a white cube, and that they were having encounters with them. And he relays a story today that I didn't know, where he'd gotten reports where these things essentially would be waiting for the jets to appear as they enter that vector of ocean. So Graves let some good stuff slip today, or be on public record, which we can discuss here. And then David Grusch, who we talked about our last episode, and I will say today, as much as he, didn't say, but offered to under classified, safe conditions, and that he wouldn't get more reprisals or for being a whistleblower. Um, he came off today more credible to me than he did, I think, in the interview. And so, all that being said, I think the major thing to mention here, and it's kind of really weird that this would be the one topic to kind of bring both parties together, but there wasn't a lot of partisan display today. There was a little bit here and there, but for the most part, you had both good parties represented on this committee. He allowed AOC to be sworn in today for the committee, the chairperson of this committee. And being a Republican chairperson, that's a pretty big deal, to allow AOC to come on and ask questions regarding this topic, when she's kind of painted as the wicked witch of the left, or whatever. So it's I kind of felt from that aspect, you have just these completely opposite personalities on this panel, but they're all kind of together for this one goal. So I mean, that was hopeful to me, I guess.
It's very Reagan-esque, right? When he had that speech, how fast, the world powers would come together if we faced an existential threat from, beyond this earth, or, this is paraphrasing, but, he really said that. If I have time, I'll drop that in here and you guys can watch it, or I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But, that has been quipped over and over and over again in a ton of different UFO shows online, or when they're talking about them. It certainly seems it certainly seems that our I think in the conspiratorial sense, I should kind of backtrack. In the conspiratorial sense, you see a lot of people who are still saying, "Oh, it's just a distraction from the real issue," and I'm wondering, like, well, what's that real issue? I mean, it's not adrenochrome and
Yeah.
this crazy right wing conspiracy stuff. We're talking about real deal stuff here. I'm not sure what it's distracting from. Maybe it is a manufactured thing. Maybe it's a manufactured thing because our country here in the United States is so split. This was viewed as like the only thing that could bring the parties together. I'm not going to say that's a real, I just probably birthed a new conspiracy or just now. Sorry about that.
It's probably out there already,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
I'll give you my favorite after you're done.
Yeah. So I would just say that that's that. I feel like it's very sort of X-Files, when we would watch the original series of the X-Files, like those first original the run before they came back, in the 20 teens. There were several times where there was going to be like a congressional hearing, and Mulder is standing in the back of the room, listening to them talk about what they uncovered and just covering it up, right? And it makes me wonder, is this what's happening today? Was there somebody in that congressional hearing who was just sitting in the back, like inconspicuous, being the man in black, but instead probably just like some regular dude wearing board shorts and flip flops? I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of, I think makes people wonder why now. But in my mind, this has kind of been going on. There's already been a few hearings regarding this issue, and I think one of the things here is that you have today testimony from these three individuals that directly kind of contradicts the official testimony that the DoD and Pentagon and others were giving in the last kind of public committee hearing about UAPs or UFOs. So, one of the things I saw today as a reaction to this is that the overwhelming conspiracy I saw mentioned is this idea of this Operation Bluebeam, where the government's going to fake an alien invasion, and that's how they're going to, get final control of locking us in our houses and all of this. So that was kind of prevalent today, that this is just all staged as a build up to this this fake, quote unquote, fake alien invasion that's going to supposedly happen.
Well, that kind of falls in line with that whole sort of what was it called? We used to call it like disinformation campaigns and things. That doesn't really sound that surprising. I mean, I've heard all kinds of things, and really, I think this really took off pre-pandemic, perhaps earlier in the in the 2000s. I mean, there are a number of key things that have happened within the United States' history that really have taken these really weird dark turns, right? Like the JFK assassination, the death of Marilyn Monroe, the Roswell crash. There's so many different things, and now we're coming up to this kind of thing. Not to mention all of the times where the government did goofy stuff to the American populace without their knowledge of it. But then when we started seeing some hardcore proliferation of these kinds of crazy ideas, like the FEMA camps, with the 1,000 coffins and body bags, and how the Fort Knox is filled up with mostly morphine, and to combat all these things, and just some really bizarre stuff. How the left is going to come grab all your guns and you should bury them in the backyard, or or you say some super egregious stuff that somebody like Alex Jones said, and then you got to pay like $1 billion. It doesn't surprise me that the conspiracy theories have really taken off into the next some real next level shit. Um, so Ryan Graves, he
Yeah.
is so we'll go through these witnesses so far. So we had Ryan Graves,
Mhm.
so he's a former Navy pilot.
Right.
He spoke out about encountering UAP on training missions. He's now the executive director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, which
Mhm.
is an aerospace safety advocacy organization. Then we had Commander David Fravor. It says he's the one who recorded the now famous TikTok video. I'm sorry, Tic Tac video.
But that's actually not true. It wasn't Fravor who recorded it. It was other members of his flight group. It was actually they witnessed it. They didn't get it on camera. The next
Okay.
group that went out, essentially, they ended up being able to record the thing, even though the object was jamming their radar and a lot of other things. I guess with the optics on the camera, in the infrared, they wasn't disabled, so they were able to get the recording of it. Sorry, just
No, that's perfect. We want to make sure that we got our facts straight. He's currently, well, it says he's just former commanding officer of the Navy, the Navy's Black Aces Squadron. And then we've got David Grusch, who's the new guy on the thing. We covered this in episode 10, the whistleblower. But he's a former Air Force and intelligence official who was a member of a previous Pentagon task force that investigated unknown aerial phenomena, or UAPs, which is AKA UFOs for those of us born, in the 80s and 90s and 70s and far back. Grusch is a whistleblower who in June interview with News Nation accused the government of a cover-up that he became aware of as a member of the National Reconnaissance Office, the agency that operates U.S. spy satellites. So we've had, I saw an interview this afternoon after the hearings. Chris Mellon, who you've seen all over the To the Stars, the thing that Tom DeLonge did, a few years ago in 2017. Since then, he went on to be a part of Luis Elizondo's TV show that they went out and they were looking at these things. And I think him and Luis Elizondo and some of the other guys have kind of moved away from the To the Stars Academy. They're doing their own thing now, which is involved in the space. But they spoke to Chris Mellon today, and he really put an emphasis on this idea that, regardless of what they figured out in this hearing, we have people who admitted. So as the factual part of this, we have intelligence that admits to having unknown aerial phenomena captured in satellite data and photography. Imagery or whatever. So that still hasn't been released to Congress, and this is one of the big problems. So he was separating kind of like what we know as fact and has been admitted by the people they're accused of, who the people are being accused of a thing, right? In this case, Pentagon and satellite imagery of unknown aerial phenomena. But the other half of this is this thing that we've recovered intact or partially intact non-human craft. And potentially the other half of this is that they said that Grusch says he interviewed multiple people who had worked on or who had been in contact with, he didn't say alien or interdimensional, he said non-human biologicals. And so he reiterated a lot of this today. And he's basically saying that there is a huge multi-decade program that operates in crash retrieval for vehicles of non-human origin. And this was just like mind-blowing to me today reading this. I was like, what planet is this? This is crazy.
Well, it tracks though, right? And that's kind of where the difficulty with some of Grusch is that, a a lot of the stuff that he's saying, if I wanted to be a distant information agent, or if I just, wanted to try to get 15 minutes in the sun. I'm not saying he's that, but I'm saying it doesn't help that a lot of the stuff that he's saying is stuff that has been circulating for many, many years. And,
But now it's this. Okay, so why? I think that's something that people are freaking out about, is because this is a dude who works in the government who's now telling on the government, right? This is like, so hey, we have these rules and things, and by the way, these okay, if these guys had followed proper procedure, Grusch probably would be like, cool, whatever. The people of the United States don't need to know about aliens,
right?
But in this case, he's been threatened with his life for essentially airing this. And I said multiple people, and really the number is 40 people, many of whom he says are still working in this program, which has been active since the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
And again, referring to these people as non-human biologics. What say you?
So I really want to I want to believe Mr. Grusch. And like I said to you earlier, he came off to me as more credible today than maybe in the News Nation interview with Russ Coulthart.
Why is that? What gave you the air that he was being more professional or more legitimate today?
I think, and I don't know if it was some choice they made in the interview, but he just seemed in the interview, quite frankly, like he was on a cocaine bender. He seemed really hyper and like, like, I'm really excited to tell you this information. And
it's nervousness.
It's quite
what it really feels like. It's kind of like when you go out for an interview of a job, and maybe you're like an animated kind of person, and you're working with your hands a lot while you're talking, and your hands are shaking or something.
Yeah.
He seemed very, I
can grant that. I mean, I just think he was more relaxed today. Seemed maybe a bit more organized. He probably thought a lot about what he would need to be able to say and not say. A lot of his answers were, I'm more than willing to go do this at a SCIF, which is essentially a secure facility where classified information can be, transmitted verbally to members of Congress. And, he was, they weren't granted one for after the hearing. And obviously the hearing, he's not going to violate his security clearance by, giving classified information out to Congress. So, a lot of the answers were not pleading the fifth per se, but, saying to them, I'm more than willing to share this information with you, but I can't do it here. I would need this SCIF, so once you kind of get those types of things out the way, he essentially confirmed everything that he said in the interview with News Nation. I think a lot of, and I'm not sure if they were sworn in or not. I've seen where, he supposedly did this under oath, but I can't recall from today if they were sworn in as witnesses. So, in any case, though, he did tell Congress, a congresswoman, that we had non-human craft and non-human biologics, as he called them.
Yeah, very, very strange stuff. If we talk about Graves for a few minutes, he's another super credible person who young guy, not like by any means senile, very serious, very straightforward individual. He had described something that I thought was pretty wild. Yeah, so he was an F-18 pilot in Virginia Beach, as you mentioned. So back in 2014, he said that his squadron reported encountering what he called mysterious, eerie objects that had no wings, gave off no infrared radiation. So that means, no heat signatures, you guys, and had no obvious means of self-propulsion. He says that the accounts were reported for a period of, and get this, 8 years, as far as I know, and still are occurring.
Yeah.
Holy shit. So like this is just something that these people, and this is something else that came up today, was this idea of the stigma around reporting these kinds of things. This is really wild because you've got such sticklers in the sides of like, this is all fantasy, that people cannot even say seriously that they saw something without some form of reprisal. And for those of you who, what does that word mean? Like essentially negative feedback or retribution in a weird sort of way, or some sort of negative thing that happens to you in a result of reporting these things, right? So if you work at a store and you tell on the supervisor, now the manager is like, thanks for telling me, might not, whatever, the supervisor hears about it and then he makes your life a living hell, right? This is reprisal. It's all this negative feedback. And so these guys are dealing with all this stuff. And we're talking about 100 years of flying, and these pilots, whether they're commercial pilots, whether they're working for the National Air and Space, or some foreign government, it doesn't matter. All these guys and women are reporting these things, at least recording them to themselves, and in some cases, reporting them up. But they've all said the same thing, that there has never really been a safe place in terms of to sit down and say, I saw this, it's real. How do I report this? And by the way, this shouldn't affect my pay grade, reviews, or early retirement.
Right. Yeah, it just goes to show, I guess, what the prevailing attitude of the military still is about these things. And I had a discussion with our good friend Greg Knott earlier about, after the UFO hearing. So I witnessed, a hearing today, a congressional hearing, where it wasn't, it wasn't actually partisan. Both parties were working together, blah, blah, blah. And he was, he mentioned about that he thinks, there's traction on it. But I told him, I said, I don't know. I think if disclosure is going to happen, it'll be accidental, because I just don't see anybody that is of any rank in, the Pentagon or upper echelon of the armed services, a credible enough person to come out and say, they're real, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't see that happening, because I think, from a defense standpoint, the U.S. military admitting that it cannot do anything about a perceived threat is completely counter to, their mission. And so at all costs,
this is like, that exposes a chink in the armor,
right,
to not only whatever these non-human intelligences could be, but also to the rest of the world. It gives the rest of the world a sort of a confirmation that we are also doing this thing, or we don't have this thing. I mean, for all we know, we could have a nation out there right now that has recovered down crashed or crashed ships or craft, that has had success and has been questioning, like, well, if the United States has this too, we shouldn't launch it. And then to know that we don't have it,
Right.
it's game on.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and this stuff is just wild. I wanted to read this really quick. It says, while he was testifying, Fravor anyway, he said the Tic Tac was perfectly white, smooth, no windows. We've all heard about this stuff. But I really liked his quote when he was asked. He said, quote, "We have nothing that can stop in midair and go in the other direction," Fravor said. "Nor do we have anything that can come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and then go back up." That's just crazy, dude.
Yeah. These I mean, the idea that these crafts are transmedium, and you see it in the one Navy video that I think Corbell helped get released, where you see you essentially have the infrared scope, and they're tracking this round, kind of almost somewhat identical to what was described in the Tic Tac video. But you can see it's very black, which I believe in infrared means it's very cold, or they're not getting any signature off of it. And it's just hovering above the water, and then it goes into the water, and you hear the guys, that are recording this or whatever, say splashdown or something like that. So
they start freaking out.
So, I mean, the idea that these things can go from outer space, orbit wherever they want on the Earth, and then go underwater is just, and from,
it defies what we know about physics,
everything that we know about physics. So it's crazy. So one of the other things today Graves talked about was an incident that happened at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and apparently they had two separate incidents of this, one in the morning and then one later in the evening, where this, like he described, a football field sized red cube came from the ocean and hovered over the Air Force Base for like 45 seconds and then just shot off. And he said this happened not only in the morning, but also it was reported the same thing happened later that evening. So not
it's probably just the sunset and the sunrise.
That's it. Yeah.
Swamp gas.
Swamp gas. Yeah. So, I mean, that to me is incredible that you have these things just, and, again, we've already had reports of this happening. The whole incident in England that happened in 80.
Oh, yeah. Rendlesham.
Yeah. They had craft essentially there reported that they were shooting beams into the nuclear weapons bunkers. We've had reports from individuals who worked at, the missile man sites out in the middle of nowhere in Dakotas and all that, where they would report or have security tell them that there are, UFOs hovering over the missiles. You have them reports of missiles going offline, all the missiles going offline, just all these crazy things happening to these to the nuclear weapon sites. So it's obvious to me that we're concerned regarding our use of nuclear weapons, for whatever that means. Maybe that still gives us a hand at why they've not, come to conquer us per se, and we just don't realize it, because they truly believe that we would probably immolate them down to the last person, even if it meant immolating ourselves, and that would be, that would not serve a scorched planet.
That's the human, right? That's human nature, is just dig your heels in even when you're wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, if this alien force is coming to conquer us, I think they truly fear that we would just unleash hell with nuclear weapons against their craft.
Okay, so go back a little bit. You started to talk about just their wild and crazy abilities, and why they haven't made contact and all of these things. And it dawns on me after, if anybody out there has ever watched or read anything about what was originally called Project Flame Grill, and then it turned into Project Stargate, which was the United States intelligence dabbling into remote viewing. Um, it was headed up by a guy named Skip Atwater, who then later on went to work for the Monroe Institute. And it was revealed that Bigelow at a point had given Skip coordinates and said, if you don't believe, you should have somebody look at these coordinates. And their whole process is essentially to remain as objective as possible so people wouldn't know anything about the coordinates other than they kind of know where they're looking on the planet because they're familiar with latitude and longitudinal lines. And when they see the coordinates, they're trained on how to visualize that in their heads. And the come away from this was essentially that the remote viewer, who was one of their most successful ones, said that there was a non-human intelligence on Earth doing some sort of energy conversion. And when asked why they don't connect with us or contact us, it was as if we are nothing to them. Like you walk outside, Darin, and you see a squirrel or a bird, and it doesn't stop you in your day to day. You just get in your car and go. And this is the same way that this person described the non-human intelligence looking to us as sort of non-issues. We are just the inhabitants of a planet. We are the animals that live here. And so it was really interesting. And it just got me thinking about that in terms of, questions of consciousness. And it brings up that idea, like, do the ants know that we walk over them?
Right.
And we are the ants. And occasionally now we've gotten to a point where, our ants have Congress and we're like, oh, we saw something up there, some big footprints, So one of the other things that we talked about with this was Grusch says that he knows of multiple colleagues of his. So this is like first person to him. Like I'll be call up on the phone, the same guy. You'll be like, hey man, how was your day? These people were physically injured by UAPs or by people within the federal government.
Right.
It was asked by Representative Eric Burleson, and Grusch answered both. So when he talked about people who were injured in the attempting to reverse engineer a recovered spacecraft, so he said, I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And then the rep said, by the UAP itself or by people within the federal government? And he said both. So this tends to, do the math. This says that our own people could be causing harm to others.
Right.
For some nefarious reason.
Yeah. So essentially either, we have government agents harming potential, witnesses, whistleblowers, etc., of this phenomenon. And, that would go to lend credence to a lot of conspiracy theories of, the way certain people have passed away. People have talked about, I'll talk about a more legitimate person, John Mack, that, John Mack was killed in England. He was hit by a drunk driver. The family essentially came to terms and forgave the man that killed him. But, there's always been this conspiracy that it wasn't a drunk driver, that it was, that Mack was learning too much about the abduction phenomenon and that, he had to be silenced. So, that's just one of the conspiracy theories that have, cropped up regarding government snuffing out these types of individuals. So, do I believe it? Yeah, quite potentially, if it meant, if you had somebody you were determined that was going to blow the lid off this thing, and you, for reasons we kind of already talked about, decide that person shouldn't speak. I'm sure that that's part of what Grusch was saying. He mentioned the idea of this trade craft, which, for people who know anything about intelligence gathering or that is essentially the tradecraft is essentially referred to as, how agencies operate and, collect intelligence data. So all that being said, that's not surprising to me. I think, reading between the lines, it was also asked regarding people being injured working on this craft. Well, I mean, we have reports even, recently with the James Fox movie regarding the Varginha, Brazil incident, where a gentleman who captured one of these beings that was supposedly captured one of these beings that was loose in the city of Varginha, died about 24 to 48 hours after his exposure.
Yeah, like horribly.
Right. Yeah. So it was essentially his entire immune system shut down on him. And, anything bad that one can imagine, essentially at your end of life scenario went wrong with the poor man. So, they are something that we are not aware of, where we don't know where they come from, or have they evolved with us here on the earth all this time and have just, been so much more technologically advanced than us. They've been able to hide themselves. I mean, I almost think of I can't remember. I think it's Next Generation. I think it's an episode, but it might be in the movie where they're essentially observing this primitive society and their observation cloaking device, malfunctions. And so essentially all the primitives see them and, begin to worship them as gods or any of this. So, is that the scenario? Are these things the first astronauts of Earth or are they extraterrestrial or are they interdimensional? I think, that's obviously yet to be determined, but I truly believe you have, this idea of, and I hate to sound ancient aliensy, but I'll make that an adjective, but, the idea of reports of angels, elves, all these mythical kind of creatures, if they're not this, could they be this intelligence or if, multiple intelligences? So I just think,
I have to agree. I think there's too much evidence to suggest anything else. My daughter came up to me today and she said, "Are aliens real?" And I just said, yeah. Like it wasn't even a question anymore. It's like, yeah.
Hey.
And is that irresponsible of me? No, I don't think so. I think, if we've got these things, something is controlling them, whatever it is. And then also you've got the Drake equation, which makes me not a liar. It says, yeah, we've got 50,000 other civilizations out there that could potentially exist in our galaxy alone. Never mind that there's, bazillions of galaxies. So yeah, to circle back to Grusch, this hearing today, which had not only Grusch, again, we had three people. We had Fravor, Grusch, and Graves. So the things that these guys brought to the table today and the questions that our representatives had for them were very telling. And to me, this has gone beyond some of those first sort of hearings that happened with one or two people from Congress showing up, jokingly listening to, probably doing whatever on their cell phones, listening to, the late great Stan Friedman and others, talking about these things, to now literally taking them so seriously that, they're asking questions about this. And one probably, look, I'm not going to say that some of these guys are not concerned with extraterrestrial or non-human intelligences, and maybe just more concerned with the idea that protocols being broken and they're not being read in on what they should be.
Right.
So there is that. But I do believe, and as far as Chris Mellon is concerned, I think he said the right things which is that these are a risk to national security. They are a risk to global securities when we don't know what they are. But then again, if you're smart enough to come here, why are you goofy enough to crash? That just always has bothered me.
Well, I think it's the law of averages essentially. If you have technological devices of any nature that are crafted, there's always going to be a percentile of accidents that will happen with any type of craft. So
That's
just
I mean,
just
the
the
laws of
idea that yeah, if they are able to build these things and travel, across the galaxy. But I think what a lot of people miss the point is that they think that these craft are the actual craft that are coming across the galaxy, whereas I think these are essentially what we would consider intelligence gathering drones or whatever, that are coming from another, either a mothership or base camp or maybe a combination of both. And I can't help but wonder, are there more than one intelligence coming here now? Is the cat essentially out of the bag, because you have descriptions of so many different types of craft that you kind of your standard disc, you have your kind of your egg shape or your tic-tac-toe, you have triangles, you have just the lights, and you have this report of this sphere and a cube, which is kind of newishly come up on the scenes with Graves. It's just, that's kind of more fascinating to me, is that the amount of these different types of craft that keep showing up. And you also have the flying wings that were reported by Arnold. Even though the term flying saucer was termed, the first type of craft he saw were essentially what he described would be flying wings. So
yeah, when you talk about multiple different intelligences, it reminds me of the story that after the Roswell crash, the lone survivor, the people taking care of it really had grown fond of it and were trying to save its life. And when being read in on it and visiting the installation, it was James Forrestal who was walking through, I guess, and he was allowed to look into the room where the alien was essentially laid up in a hospital bed. And he looked at it, and it was later reported, and I think they somewhat sensationalized it in the made for HBO movie Roswell. Some sort of a telekinetic, not telekinetic, but a telepathic message was sent to Forrestal, and he looked shocked for a moment, and they said, "What's wrong?" And he said, I heard it in my head." And they said, "What'd it say?" And he said, "Many more species will come, different races, and then it dies." And so, um, maybe, right? We are dealing with unknown territory that we have sort of in an imaginative way dealt with for the last almost 100 years, since Kenneth Arnold first reported seeing quote unquote flying saucers that skipped across, like a stone across water.
mhm.
We have been mentally preparing ourselves for invasion since the first Hollywood silver screen movies that came out.
Prior to that, you had Orson Welles' War of the Worlds in '39 that caused essentially him to have to go testify before Congress at that time, regarding a radio play that was so realistic that it actually made actual people believe that we were being invaded from
That's
outer
right.
space.
Yeah, this is hysterical. So Are we ready for disclosure? These people who are talking about they want disclosure today, they want disclosure tomorrow. I think that was a quote from today. I don't know if we're I don't know if we're ready, because it feels like even right now, even myself,
Mm,
who I would think, yeah, I'm ready for aliens. Am I? Because even today, when I'm reading these things about what's being claimed in the congressional level in these hearings, I'm thinking like, I have to keep reminding myself, this is real life.
mm,
This is like when you're watching a movie about contact, and in the movie, somebody's watching TV, and there's like on their TV, there's a congressional hearing about contact.
mm.
And now this is happening right now in real life in our world.
Right.
Granted, it's not contact, but we're like, this is a real thing. We need to legitimize this because the phenomenon is real.
So my take on disclosure is, I just, for many different reasons, don't think it's going to happen. And as I said, if it does, it's going to be like accidental. Somebody's going to lose their temper and say something under oath in front of Congress or something like along those lines. So that would be essentially lead to disclosure of this. Even if, and I'm just going to use an example. So for example, today, essentially Representative Burkett, who was sworn onto the committee, and another representative from Florida went essentially to an Air Force base, and I forget which Air Force base they went to, but they wanted access to Air Force Base because this is one of the places they were told there was some evidence of, otherworldly craft, and they were denied access. And essentially, he said something about Representative Gates, who, gagged me. But anyway, I will give him props. He seemed intelligent today. So, and something he said kind of was fascinating, because he said that he was able to see essentially a photograph of one of these things that one of the pilots had taken. Take that for what it's worth. But back to my point, if a couple of things I think with disclosure. First thing is, I don't think a lot of people, it's going to sink into a lot of people. I mean, just think about today in the hearings. If I were to go out on Twitter, I don't know that it's trending. Maybe it was earlier, but
are we just too self-absorbed to care?
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I think that a lot of people are too self-absorbed to care. I mean, quite frankly, short of aliens coming and saying they can't do this or that, are people really going to care? Or I dare say, if aliens were to come down and declare allegiance to one political party or another, then people may, one side may care and the other may not.
Well, it's like maybe in 50 years, we'll just know, and it's a thing, and nobody says anything about it. It was just kind of this gradual acceptance of,
but I mean,
with never a finding. I mean, it's kind of like the JFK assassination. Everybody always talks about the Warren report, but that wasn't the official report. It's the House Special Committee on Assassinations that reported that it was likely a rogue conspiracy of three or more rogue CIA agents that murdered the president. That's the official finding. And like, nobody knows that. And it's just out there. It's like, whatever. And like, will just aliens be the next JFK? I mean, this came up even recently. Chuck Schumer, I think he addressed some of that defense bill, and inside of it, he added like something about releasing documents that do require executive sort of authorization to release all the JFK files, because they were up for complete release under the Trump administration,
right? And he had actually said he was going to release them, and then the
11th hour,
yeah.
and the 11th hour, he was like, "Oh, I guess I can't."
So I wonder what intelligence agency had blackmail material on him to get that to stop. You have to wonder.
Yeah, for sure. So I
Wonder
mean, it's like,
what uh,
so Schumer wants this information out, as well as it looks like he's going to address the this congressional issue of reporting to Congress about these kinds of actions, at least as Grusch and others are looking at doing, which is
mhm,
disclosing even more in a classified setting.
yeah. And I think one of the things that Commander Fravor and Graves were really trying to hammer home is, especially Commander Graves, that there's no real, reporting apparatus for this. So even now, where there's supposedly this official reporting apparatus that was put into place with whatever they're calling the body that was, is investigating UAPs now. What is it, AARO or something like that? Something along those lines. But in any case, that we were essentially, there was a part of the, I think it was the pandemic relief that kind of led to the first, about Congress having to have a hearing about UFOs, and that led to the first kind of hearing with the Pentagon and so on and so forth. Um, the quote unquote official hearing with the government officials, where they essentially denied a lot of the stuff that you have this push from, separate areas of Congress to get this information. And I think more of it is Commander, or not Commander, I guess he was a colonel at one point. Grusch's testimony that a big thing here is that there's massive misappropriation of funds going on, that there's money earmarked for one thing, and it's essentially being funneled off for these black projects of studying these craft and trying to back engineer these crafts. So, and that a lot of this money are going to certain contractors, which ethically raises the idea of why are certain government contractors benefiting from this technology while others are not. And so you have that. You have the idea of disclosure not happening just because of the amount of money and power that is made and from fossil fuel industry, to put it bluntly. Oil, coal, methane gas, all the stuff that we're taking from the earth to make energy for ourselves. All that money would essentially be in jeopardy, because if you back engineer a craft of this nature, it's essentially creating 0 point energy, right? It's clear, it's very clean energy that it's using to propel itself or do whatever, its maneuvers and so on and so forth. So or at least we believe it's clean energy, without actually having what if we find out that essentially these crafts are like the Yugos of, interdimensional craft or something. We back engineer one and we end up going to God knows where. And like all their craft are like new and shiny. And we pull up like with the Ford Pinto with the headlight out and a flat tire. You know what I'm saying?
just complete yeah, junky UFOs.
Like, oh, those guys visited you too. Oh, they're terrible. They're like we're being essentially visited by the Jawas of
Of the galaxy.
the
Yeah.
galaxy. Yeah, but and then I think you being more serious here, a more serious turn is the idea that if disclosure happens, then how do we address the abduction phenomenon? Because you have essentially said, yeah, we got aliens coming here. We can't do anything about them. But
is this a violation? Will we find out
right
that our own government is complicit in
made
a sort of
attack, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, like if the U.S. government is complicit in this, then there are even more human rights violations that will need to be addressed in the future.
Think about what we did to the Native Americans when we came over here. So here, yeah, you can have this rifle. We want to take all your gold and some of your women, but yeah, you can have this shiny new toy. We'll even teach you how to fire it and give you some of this stuff you put in it to, shoot. And essentially, are you wondering, is our government just that gullible that they would, in an effort to win the Cold War at that time, accept a essentially a Trojan horse from unknown non-human intelligence? Probably, because people are greedy and they suck. But I mean, at end of the day, it's just there's so many questions that actual disclosure would, I think, raise, and therefore I think that's one of the reasons that the powers that are hiding these things are trying to keep it hidden. So, but I think the real reason probably of all of those, I think I'm being too empathetic, thinking that somebody would be out there thinking about abduction and phenomenon victims or whatever, abductees, I guess would be the correct term. And that it actually probably just boils down to pride, and that they just would be they're too prideful to admit that there's actually something that could kick their butt that's on this planet,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good place to, I think, wrap for the evening. These are all amazing questions, and I think we're only going to hear more as time moves forward, because this is gaining more and more steam, so to say, and we'll see what happens with the next hearing. We'll see what happens with the next reporting. So yeah, Darin, what do you think we should talk about next time?
Boy, I still really think we should explore the Chicago Mothman, considering your experience with the West Virginia one, and kind of break down that sort of
that Mothman is next. Then we'll cover the Mothman. We'll have a special guest on, I'm hoping, as well. We'll get our friend Marty on the show, and we'll rap about that, because I think he's also he's had a sighting, we should say.
Yeah, I know he is very obsessive about the topic. He's got like a map of all of the sightings updated, a Google map that I don't know if he's created or he's getting it from somewhere, but I don't know if he saw it or know somebody who saw it. But yeah, Marty's a great guy to get on anyway, so we can see if he'll come on and rap about that stuff.
Awesome. Well, until the next time, everybody, for Beyond the Fourth Veil, I'm Robert Johnson.
I'm Darin Laners.
And we'll catch you all, on some other dimension, or
on the flip side.
We'll catch you Beyond the Fourth Veil.
There you go. Way to work that in. Nice segue. That's why you're the pro.